So the kind of two things going on at once here, which is, always the case in drawing or art or anything. It's not just one thing that you need to know to make a good drawing. You need to know a ton of things, but it's really hard to teach something in kind of its, kind of pared down aggregate form. Taylor, can you hear me? Are you there? In and out. I don't know. There you are. Taylor, you can hear me? You there?
Yeah.
Okay, good. How you doing?
I've been better.
That's good. That's good. That's always good news.
I have a massive headache right now. That's all.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Sometimes that's seasonal too.
Yeah, my allergies always act up when it starts getting into spring.
I know. I'm the same way. In fact, I have an appointment to go to an allergist and get shots. So I'm going to try that. I've done that a couple of times over the years, and it seems to work. So we'll see what happens this year. Takes a while though. Okay, so we're doing kind of two things at one time this week. We're going to talk about the ellipse, which is always a difficult one. All that is the circle in perspective. Okay, so that's on there's two sheets that I gave you, and you can see how complicated things are, right? It's like it's just a friggin' bowl, right? How can that be so hard to draw? But it is, the circle in perspective, which is the opening of the bowl, of course, right? Is a circle when you look straight on at it. But, how does it present itself to you in perspective, right? That darn perspective, that kind of, always gets in the way of having fun. But so that's one thing. We're going to tackle it. It kind of makes sense to do that first and do the value relationship thing afterwards. But I'm not going to not going to force you into worrying too much about that right now, the structural, how to draw a bowl or a cup or whatever. And a cylinder, a bowl is a cylinder, right? So it's just a cup is a cylinder, right? It's just that it's tapered, right? And it's rounded, right? It's still a cylinder. Mm-hmm. Hey, David, Alyssa, how you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Hanging in there. Just talking about what we're going to do this week. It'll be two different drawings. So not a ton of time on each, but just enough to get your feet wet with us.
Gotcha.
So how you confront that, that's a difficult thing. Typically, let me see if I can show you real quick. So let's say the bowl looks something like, let's pull or the cylinder, let's put it that way. The cylinder might look, I want to use blue. Blue's more. So the opening would be the elliptical form. Okay. That's still two. And it's a circle in real life, right? So, and then the cup, if it's a rounded, a tapered rounded form, or if it just goes straight down like a pipe would or something like that, then these sides would go straight down, right? And then the bottom, if it's the same, essentially the same dimension, if you could see through it, would look something like that, right? Like, let's pretend that's a glass cylinder. You get the idea. So, in fact, that'd be a little rounder. Something like that. Okay. That's how you see it, right? That's the foreshortening. The front to back relationship versus left to right is foreshortened. But this is kind of how people draw it. Not all the time, but they'll draw it more like that again, like they know it, right? Closer to the full circle, which would be like that if they're looking straight down on it, right? So there's a technique to kind of figure out the front to back relationship. So they might draw the cylinder, and I see this happen where they really round out the top and then go down to the bottom of the vessel, whatever it happens to be, right? A cup, a mug, whatever it happens to be, go straight down. We'll say it's a mug. And then they'll do the bottom. Again, this is going to be transparent, but you get the idea here. They'll do better with that. They'll flatten that out a little bit more. In fact, sometimes they flatten it out altogether, right? But so super round, not, that's kind of typical. But the hard part is to figure out how much of the front to back of elliptical form. Now, this could apply to a tabletop. It could apply to a clock on the wall if you're looking at it from an angle, et cetera, et cetera. It's just endless, the circles. I'm looking at my speakers for my monitors here, and those are circles, right? So circles everywhere. How do you deal with that in perspective? Not easy. Okay, so we're going to deal with that on Thursday. Okay, and that's that second sheet that I sent to you. First sheet, all I want you to start to think about is using that scribble technique to start to create a sense of volume on a cup or a form or a cylindrical form. A cylinder is a nice shape to use to think about that idea of modeling. Call it modeling. Okay, the way a particular shape reveals itself via the roundness of the surface. Okay. Hey, Judy, you back in?
Yeah, I got bumped out somehow.
Oh, no, sorry about that.
Yeah, no idea.
Sometimes that happens, just kind of the wind blows a certain direction or something. So a couple things going on here. So the structure of this cup, right, it ties into that notion that we'll deal with a little later. So I don't want you to worry too much about that. Okay. What I want you to worry about, though, is two things. Developing your drawing in such a way that you can create lights and darks in the drawing. Okay. Through the use of relative value. And number two, create the implication of edge of the object, okay, without drawing outline. Thursday, you can use outline, but I want you to try to attempt to draw this thing without using outline to begin with, okay? So how do you draw the shape, i.e. the form of something, without outlining it?
Drawing circles?
Well, you're referring to kind of the scribble technique?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can use that scribble technique, not necessarily circles, but just tiny little scribbles, right? Just random little scribbles like we did with scribble drawings. That's right. That's correct. So rather than using outline if you note in this drawing right here, I don't have any outline. There's no outline controlling the shape of that thing, and i.e. the form, by default, the form. So
shading,
making areas lighter or darker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pure and simple, okay? Realize that in the world around us, all shapes that we see in the world around us are differentiated one from another purely through color or light and dark, which would be value, okay? So whatever you see in the world around you, you can see one thing as separate from another thing because its edge is delineated by the fact that it is darker or lighter than the thing behind it. Okay, we don't think about that when we look at the world, but that's what's happening. Or a different color. Okay, one or two things, that's all. If we lived in a world of purely black and white, and we made everything the same value. Somehow we're able to light the world so everything is exactly the same value. Right? Let's say a mid-tone, like a 5 on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being absolute white, 10 being absolute dark. And everything's a 5. Everything's a 5. You would see nothing. You would see nothing but that value 5. You wouldn't be able to differentiate one shape from another. Okay, so this idea of outline or contoured line, which we'll talk about later on in the semester, is a construct. It's artificial. It doesn't exist. Okay, it's an easy way and an artful way to create shape in drawing, right? Or to create expressive quality in the drawing. Now, these little tiny marks I'm making are lines in and of themselves because that's the nature of drawing, right? But I'm not using the line as an outline here. I'm using it as an accumulation of marks over time to create darker value, right? So that's why I had you do that scribble drawing, the series of them. You know, they were nice. You did a really good job with those. Some people pushed a little hard on that, okay? So we got to kind of pull back a little bit when you do your scribble drawings and work small enough that you can kind of gain some fidelity in this drawing, okay? So let's look at one of these videos, for instance. And you can, by the way, I took a photograph, you know, the one video I'm going to show you here. I used a photo as a source because I wanted to have the photo there while you watched me develop the drawing, okay? So you can kind of see how I thought about the application of these swaths of value to create the shape and create the form. Now, if you want to use this, I sent the photo along with the 2 project descriptions. If for this drawing, which will be due at the end of the week, but I want you to get started on it, because we're doing 2 this week. You can either choose your own object to draw. It needs to be something white against a white sheet of paper. Notice the white sheet of paper back here. Hey, Taylor.
Hey.
You're back.
Yeah,
we're having trouble with
weird.
What's that?
Yeah, my internet is going in and out.
Okay, yeah. Maybe it's just the something that's going on, you know, around the region or something, because Judy had a problem with that as well.
I was bumped out too.
Yeah. Well, we'll kind of forge ahead here, and if you hopefully can get back in, you know. If not, I'm recording this, so I'll post it too as well. So,
Okay.
So notice I have a white background, right? So get used to that because I'm going to have you. It's not a huge thing right now, but I want you to kind of think about how to set up a still life, okay, and how to light it. By the way, look at this coffee cup here. Which direction do you think the light is coming from?
The top.
It is definitely coming from the top. Yep. But how about a left or right issue too? So it is top. It's not underlighting. That's correct. Yep.
It's coming from the left?
Yes. Left top, I would say, would be a good description of that. And what gives you those clues?
Where the shadow is at?
The cast shadow. That's right. This is moving to the right there, right? So you know that the light's probably coming from the left, right? And look at how it's modulating around the roundness of the cup here, right? So highlight, medium, and goes to dark on the right side. Notice the cylinder is a really nice form to learn how to do value because the inside is just the opposite. Dark value here, this is sheltered from the light. Makes you start to think about what the direction of light, how it relates to art making. And it is very important. All the great masters, you look at their paintings, you know, the great people who do two-dimensional stuff, paintings and drawings, printmaking, they are so tuned into where the light comes from and how it's reacting. And then it's catching on the right side of the interior, right? So there's physics involved here, kind of, right? You're even getting a inside of the handle here, over here, I don't know if you can see that, but is a little bit shadowed on the outside there, highlight, right? Why is it I can see this highlight right here? as opposed to it blending into the background. This area right here. How do I differentiate that in this photo? It's just a photograph. Why am I able to differentiate that from the background here?
Well, the shading in the background is just a hint darker.
That's right, subtly darker. That's correct. Yep. Likewise, how am I able to differentiate the interior part of this from that same background in the same area?
Because it's a lot darker than the background.
That's right. So which background looks darker, the one here or the one here?
We couldn't see your pointer.
Sorry, the one to the left, that little pointer doesn't want to. So this area right here, this area right in here, this background area versus this background area, which looks darker? To just looking at it.
I think the one outside.
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
It might be because the interior of the handle is so dark.
Yes, it's both are, yeah, that's correct. Both are happening. So it's fooling our eye a little bit, right? We know they're close, this background area and this background area are pretty close to each other in the whole picture, right? You know, so we know it's not really changing value, that light, this area to this area. But what's happening is our eye is seeing this dark area and making this look lighter by default. Our eye is seeing this light area and making this look darker by default. That's relative value. Okay.
So when we draw this, should we make all the background in that area the same amount of shading, and then the optical illusion will happen in our picture, just like you pointed out?
Right. And okay. I'll walk you through that. So a really good point. Okay. So when you're making the drawing, here's a little bit, this is on that first project description. I just briefly kind of, I put in a video here that kind of deals generally with this visual measurement thing, how to assess it. You don't need to worry a ton about this. I talk about lighting, direction, and all that sort of stuff. That's more important. But if you want to think about getting some symmetry going, but you're not drawing an outline, so it's really hard to really focus on that in this. But this video is part of the for you to look at, just to think about that idea of symmetry and foreshortening of elliptical form and all that stuff. This is the one probably that'll help you. This and the next one I'll show you out the most. So to Judy's question here about the background. So what I'm going to ask you to do is do your scribble drawing again, okay, for about 20 minutes. You can either use a full sheet of paper. I kind of like the idea of these being, just these kind of exploratory drawings with using the scribble and value, and not worrying too much about precision in terms of the shape of the thing, like I said. So doing a big sheet might be kind of fun for you. I don't know, it might be cool, just really expressive. Make sure you go lightly though. And make the cup big, fill up the composition with the cup too, by the way. So if you're working big, you don't want a tiny little cup in the middle of your 18 by 24 drawing, make it way bigger than life size, okay? What was I gonna say? So number one, that was number one. Oh, number two, or you can do a half sheet. If you're not, just cut one of your piece of paper in half and do turn it horizontally and do a half sheet, if that's okay too. So what I'm going to ask you to do is spend about 20 minutes, just like you did before, preparing for the drawing. And the way you're going to prepare for the drawing is by putting a field down, a value. Okay, just a general neutral field of value. Now you do it in a light enough way. I don't know if I showed you guys. I think this is one of Sarah's and one, I think either Christine's or. So these are two of the half-hour drawings of the scribble drawings, the last exercise we did in those mark-making exercises. Now you could see in these drawings, I think Sarah's on the left. I think this. Do you recognize?
Only barely.
What's that?
It's very hard to see.
Yeah, well, it's really light. I mean, it's hardly there. Remember the last that's there's a reason for it. Remember the last the last one of those exercises I told you, make a drawing that we can almost not see, right?
Yeah, the third experiment.
Yeah, can you put scribbles and just light marks on a sheet of paper and mesh them together in such a way that you have a really a nice handle on the mark making process and a real sensitive touch in such a way that you almost don't see anything, right? That they're all kind of blending together in a very light way. Christine, I don't know if this is yours or not. Do you recognize that?
I think it is.
It might be yours, yeah. So that's what I'm talking about. So that's your field, right? To then apply the cup to. Your neutral, and Judy, I hope this answers your question, the neutral field upon which you will create your cup. Now, I don't want you to erase in this drawing, okay? No erasing. David, to answer your question, can you see the kind of really light marks in there? David, did we lose David? David, are you there? I don't know if you're there.
My mic is off, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. That's okay. You said you can hardly see nothing. That's because it's so lightly drawn. But can you see those really light marks in there now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm blowing it up, a great deal there. So there's mark making in there. It's just that it was done so lightly and, so quickly that all those marks mesh together. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing this is because it's really nice to be able to blend with the tip of the pencil and not take your finger and blend the drawing, because the moment you start blending the drawing with your hand or your finger in terms of graphite, it undoes all that kind of beautiful mark making that you engage in to create the drawing. And all a drawing is a vibration, right? That's what makes it so nice. So why not take just a photograph? Because it's about the process of making. So, so I like to blend and build value through the act of a cumulative process, right? Just adding. I'm not, pushing much harder when I do this. Eventually, yes, but in this case, no. It's just I'm hanging out longer in a certain area. That's all. Okay. So those areas get darker. It's just time spent, okay? So if we had a big field like this in our drawing, how would I make, if I can't erase, how would I make something look lighter?
You could always just draw the lines more against one another to make them look darker.
In the area I want to look lighter, or adjacent areas?
Oh, I think you said if you want them darker.
No, lighter. How would I make something look lighter? I already have this neutral tone there and I can't erase, so how would I show highlights?
And that's what I'm trying to say is you make other areas darker, so these areas.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly correct. So you got to kind of think a little bit as you're drawing, right? Plan ahead a little bit as you're drawing. So let's walk through this one real quick here. Now in this one I used and again, you can use this source up here, this cup, if you want to. You can set your own up. The only stipulation you'll need to light it yourself, right? We'll talk about that a little bit later. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that right now. So you get this kind of side light. And it has to be a white object on a white background so that we can really focus on this idea of value, okay? So on this one, I didn't lay down, I kind of went in a little bit and laid scribbles across the whole thing, but you're going to have more of a medium value on your drawing. But what I did was I just kind of, let's see here. I guess I'll just scrape through this. Mute this, run it as I go. I did this on the Sketchbook Pro it's a little more difficult. I mentioned in this video, you can go in and erase. I don't want you to in this one, okay? I had to in the Sketchbook Pro because it's a digital program, and I found that the marks kind of clump together. It's not as nice as using a regular a piece of paper. So, and this is sped up, of course, you know, quite a bit. So you notice that as I develop this, I'm just hanging out in those areas that where the darkness is, right? Dark up in the inside. So I'm hanging out there right now. And I'm not being too, you know, do you see any edges on this drawing at this point that have clear-cut delineation of like a real crisp quality to the edge of the drawing? Or to the edge of the cup in the drawing? Not really, right? It's really vague, right? At this point, really open. That means I'm working around the drawing. I'm not hanging out in any one area. Let's keep going. This is what I'm looking at. I'm literally looking at the photo I took there as I draw this. I see all those crisp edges. I see all that detail, but I'm not drawing it. I'm being more beholden to the idea of the marks, right? The scribbles, the idea of developing the drawing as a drawing, not being tied to the idea of cupness. Now, look what I'm doing there. Why am I hanging out up in this background area? Why would I even bother with that up there?
Because the background in the image is a little bit darker compared to the cup.
Right. So if I just hung out right in here, right along that margin where I perceive there to be where the edge of the cup is going to be, right? I, in essence, am just putting an outline around that. You know, it's not a single line, but if I just like filled in value right along there, left this stuff alone, then in essence, I'm just outlining the darn thing. And I'm back to just why not putting a line in, okay? So if you're filling, you know, if you're trying to create contrast between a light area and a dark area, background and object here in this case, you have to spend time going all to the edge of the drawing, filling up this whole area out to the edge of the drawing. That's why I did those exercises with you too, to start you to think about addressing the whole drawing. It's a whole thing, right? It's not just an object setting in a big white sheet of paper, right? We're completing a complete thought, right? Which is value everywhere, foreground, background, you know, all that stuff. So if I'm going to darken this, I got to darken this out here at the same time. So you're going to have a neutral value on your drawing anyways, right? So that'll help a little bit, you know, you can, you can kind of get a better feel for lights and darks when you have a kind of a neutral value on your drawing. So I'd spend about 20 minutes doing that. And then start to kind of do these patches in your drawing. Okay, let's move ahead here. Still no clear-cut areas, right? Do you see any areas on the cup that are like no man's land where you can't, excuse me, figure out where one value bumps into another, like where the edge or the edges of the form disappear into the background or disappear into the inside versus the outside, et cetera, et cetera? Are there any areas in this drawing right now where you see that happening, where there's no delineation between object and background?
I see that a little bit in the handle.
Yeah, I do too. Down here, definitely, right? Like right in this area. I wasn't overly concerned because look at the photograph here. I don't know if you can kind of see that. I'll go back to that in a second. almost the handle almost blends in with the background there, right? It's kind of hard to see. I can't blow this up, but I'll show you when we go back to the photo here. So definitely there. There's a no man's land right here where the transition takes place, right? There's got to be a spot right in here somewhere where the inside of the cup and the outside of the cup are the same value, right? And kind of up here too. So I'm just going to those areas that I see that are important contrast transitions, right, in the drawing to begin with, okay, to begin with. Like there's definitely a no man's land area between the shadow side of the cup here and the cast shadow on the paper here, okay? It's like I hardly see any difference there. Same here. I'd let it all become one. A little more difference here, but here I let it kind of blend in. It's a hard way to draw. I mean, it's a really difficult way to, because we're just not taught to do this from when we're young, you know, particularly with those darn coloring books we color in, because everything's like controlled already and we just have to color in the lines, right? It's a lot more free way of working, and it engenders form a lot more. It's a really nice way to kind of create three-dimensional quality in a drawing, because you're not just simply filling in a flat shape. Okay.
And this is still without lines?
Yep. This is just the first one we're going to do. It's just using these scribbles to apply value to try to try without outline. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Now is that due on Thursday, or is it due on Friday? Because you said
both
Thursday.
Of these drawings are due by the end of the week. You know, however you want to kind of manage that. I'm going to go over the second drawing I want you to do on Thursday. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. So that'll be a mandatory meeting on Thursday. Okay.
Alrighty.
Yep. Well, thanks for clarifying that. The logistics are important. So I'm starting to kind of tailor my mark making here a little bit, getting a little smaller with it. Just kind of, you know, I'm about 3/4 of the way through the drawing here. So I'm starting to kind of go a little smaller with my marks. Still not tying into edge. If I did a crisp outline around this whole thing, see this kind of area right here between the two values right there? I don't know if you can see that right there, that light area between this dark patch here and this dark interior. Why did I leave that alone right there?
Because that's a light area and that's the rim of the cup.
That's right. It's where the light's hitting the rim or the thickness of the cup, right? So not like just doing one line for that outline allows me to really reveal the form of the thickness of the cup as well, right? So working in this really, you're moving fast, but you're developing really slowly because you got a nice sense of touch, allows you to start to see these form nuances that you wouldn't see if you just outlined the darn thing, okay? It trains your eye again, right, to see the world. The drawing is a way to see the world, essentially, right, anew. And you have this wonderful artifact if you take your time too, right, and if you kind of are serious about the whole thing, right? Now, so here's where I kind of go in with a light line, just because I was getting frustrated with but I don't want you to do that in this. You'll see that in the video, but it's just a way of kind of, because of the nature of the digital media here, was not totally cooperating. So it just kind of develops and develops and develops. Now that's a big image, right? You know, I mean, I'm filling up the whole piece of paper there. You get back a little bit, all those lines start to mesh together, right? You know, and then I kind of chose, like here, I made that just a little darker so I could delineate. That's a really nice little area on the drawing where the handle, I don't know if you can see where the handle and the kind of body of the cup come together. So I kind of just darkened that in a little bit. So you can set up your own little still life, or you can use that photograph for this. This is the only time I want you to use a photograph, but just to learn how to do value, I think it's an important aspect here. So So you can use this photograph that I sent along to you just as a reference, okay? Now, in terms of the idea of value here, just kind of want to review just a little bit. I don't know if you got a chance to look at this. So essentially it's lights and darks, right? That's all value is. And you got different types of, in this particular scenario, lighting. So you got direction of light, which we call the directional light, you know, that just is what it says is where the light's coming from. Excuse me. And in this case, it's from the left and top, like we talked about. Pull that up a little bit. This is in that document I sent to you guys. Talk about relative contrast, right? So this is kind of a refresher for you as you're developing the drawing. These are called highlights, right? You've heard that term before, okay? The modeling shadow is that the gradation between light and dark across a surface that's curved, okay? Call that modeling shadow. So that's on the object itself. So there's a modeling shadow on the interior, right? It's just kind of concave, that's all, okay? There's a little modeling shadows we discussed on the handle of the cup, all right? This is called a cast shadow, where the shadow's projected onto a different surface, okay? That's different than a modeling shadow. And then sometimes we get what's called reflected light, right there, that area underneath, which you can see in the photo here. Why is that lighter right there?
Is that light bouncing back up from the surface?
That's it exactly, yep. So that's not a directional light, right? But that's called a reflected light. And we see that a lot in paintings, really, you know, really wonderfully done paintings. You'll see like portraits are that way. Sometimes you'll get a little reflected light from whatever shirt somebody might be wearing coming up underneath the jaw, underneath the nose, definitely under the eyes sometime. It's a really subtle, nuanced light, but it's one that, you know, is important to think about. So essentially what's happening, the light's coming down, hitting the surface, and this surface right here is real close to the cup, right? That light's going to bounce back up and hit underneath the cup. And you get a subtler light right there. Won't be as bright as this, okay? So let's think about scale right now of value for this cup. 0 being absolute white, nothing, like the sun, right? And a 10 being absolute black, right? Like there's no light at all. Are there any zeros in this?
I think on the top back of the rim, there's a little slice.
That little highlight right there? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep.
And over on the handle on the top.
Yep, right there.
Right there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, right here. That's
I
like,
think there's another. Yeah.
Go ahead, Judy. What'd you say?
No, I hadn't noticed the third one.
Yeah. There's, yeah, on the front, right? Yeah, yeah. And a little bit down here. Like you draw a portrait, you see the glint in the eye, right? That would be that area that kind of doesn't have any value, or you wouldn't apply any value to it all. You'd leave that alone. Now, I don't expect you to put that in there, number one, because you'll have a medium value over your whole drawing, right? By the time you start to do the cup. And number two, that's probably even that, I don't know, it might be, but in this photo, it's probably not even white, but it's real close. I would say maybe a 1, maybe. It could be a 0, but it's probably a 1. How about a 10, which is the absolute black?
Underneath the cup.
Yep, definitely. This area right here. Realize that's not an outline, right? If you look real close at that, that's just a little cast shadow where the shadow is really thin right there, right? That's why outlines are kind of so weird, you know. I mean, they're good, but we don't want to deal with it here. Now, if you were drawing that in the drawing, you know, you'd have to put a line there, right? Because it's so thin. But essentially what's happening is just a little area where I'm seeing no light underneath the cup, right, against the paper, right? That's on the paper there. So I would say that could be close to a 10, probably. Yeah, yeah. How about a 5?
I'd say maybe the interior of the handle set, is that about in the middle?
That
Shading?
could be, yeah. I would say that would be that could be if
Could
zero.
be a 4.
Yeah, it's a tough one. You got to kind of think about, like, definitely that's brighter than this, right? This area in the interior of the thing does not. I'll just do this. That area is darker, I think, than this area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe the interior is the 5.
Could be. If this is a 5, then this could be a 6, maybe. This area, like right in here, maybe 7 or something. I don't know. This might be a 4, maybe, from 0 being absolute white. But it's a tough thing. But you're in the ballpark there. I don't even know what it would be, but but you have to start thinking about those relationships and when you're focused on relative value, right? How about this area on the 0 to 10 scale?
I'd say 2, maybe 1 or 2.
I would say 2 as well. Yeah, 2, yes. Yeah, so see where your brain has to go with this stuff, and that's why it's important to move around the drawing all the time and develop it slowly. There's no way you can with certitude figure out one value area and then never address that again in the rest of the drawing as you're working in, okay? You have to do it like patchwork, right? Go a little bit here, darken here, I go darken here, I got to, and you only have darkening as a tool here, not lightening, right? So you're going to have to kind of move slow. This is going to stretch your brain, which is what I'm here for, right? So be mindful of that. It's not easy, right? It's not easy to do this stuff, but so the development of this stuff is really a slow process, right? Don't want you to spend a ton of time on the drawing because we're going to do the other one, as Alyssa and I talked about. We'll do the outline drawing on Thursday, and then by the weekend, just turn in both drawings. That's all. Okay, that's kind of how I want this to work this week, because I can't teach both these at the same time because it just kind of confuses things, I think. Okay, so a little bit of review here. Well, here's one I did. I just did one on my iPad of a bowl. It's a good one too. There's a video there for you to watch. There's a number of videos to watch. I think it's a nice one. I just did it out of my head, just kind of when we first started to go online here and do this stuff. Which one is it? This one. So it's the same essential principle, left to right, lighting, using the scribble technique. And I don't know how long this is. This is like I don't know, 15-minute video. So I probably spent a couple hours on this, drawing it. Let's see if there's any marks going on here. Yeah, it's running, so. Don't see anything. There's got to be stuff happening. Where's Waldo? Oh, there's Waldo down here. Waldo's over here now. So it's still a kind of a freeing process, this applying these scribbles. It's free, open, fun-loving, joyous, but tempered in terms of a sense of touch, okay? Now, see, I'm lightening up the front of this bowl by going into the background there, or the foreground background. And there's a vibration to the drawing, right? It's just kind of, you know, you're processing all the time. We're sensory, or we're hearing things in the world, and that's coming through us and being filtered into this act of mark making. And so it's like all that stuff's embedded in. So it's not just about making a bowl, it's about making a drawing of a bowl, right? Or a cup, or whatever the case may be. And so this kind of embracing this idea of laying energy onto a sheet of paper is a nice thing, right? You don't want to hide that, in my estimation, right? At least in this process. So there's that video as well. So you can see as I develop the drawing, the more marks I lay down, you know, the more resolution you get, right? Now on this one I had to, because it's a digital drawing, I went in a little bit with the white marks as well, but I don't want you guys to do that. So you can see the finished version here, you know, the density that you can gain in the drawing, right? And that's the other thing. The more marks you have on the piece of paper, the denser the drawing feels. And by default, the more dense the object you're trying to render feels, right? So there's this real oomphy quality to it that didn't have to begin with, right? Okay, so this mark making, this rapid mark making with a sense of touch, a sense of delicacy, enables this sense of density in the work as well. Okay. Okay. All right. That's a lot of information. Keep your pencil sharp, 2H. I outline all that stuff here in the, you know, so kind of review, not this one, but review the first one. You know, I talk about the process and everything in this project description. Okay. So everything you need to know is in here. Okay. So big sheet or half sheet, it's up to you. You can do your own still life if you feel comfortable doing that. If not, use the photo I sent. Start by just, you know, preparing your brain and the drawing surface with those really light, beautiful, airy scribbles to get the ball rolling. Right? If you go too dark, then you're sunk. Okay, because you'll be able to do highlights. And then just slowly start to carve this thing into being and it doesn't need to be a finished, refined drawing. No. In fact, I would rather you err on the side of it not being, right? Let it be open, beautiful mark making, a drawing about mark making that's referencing. Like this is halfway through this drawing, or this is a quarter way through this drawing, right? The bowl drawing right there, right? That's a nice drawing. That could be a finished work of art, right? As I said to some of you guys, you know, in terms of that, some of those images you came up with the exercises are almost, you know, abstract things that could be framed, right? So, well, who's to say that's not a good piece in its quarter stage completeness, right? So, but, you know, spend enough time on it that you get some results. And then focus on this relative value thing and not outlining the thing. What tends to happen, by the way, students will start to make their marks go too much along. They'll scribble, but they'll make their scribbles go in the direction of the edge. So they might as well be outlining the darn thing. Make your scribbles be independent of the direction of a particular edge. That's a difficult thing to comprehend, but you know, try to do that if you can. Make your scribbles go in different directions. You're just bundling them in order to kind of create a particular direction of an edge. But don't get caught up in making your scribbles go the direction of an edge, okay, when you're developing these things. And it's an experiment, right? You're doing something maybe for the first time here, and so don't be hard on yourself either. You know, should be kind of a freeing thing in a certain way. If you do it the right way, almost can't go wrong. Because I'm not holding your feet to the fire in terms of the structure of the thing, okay? So don't worry about that right now. Okay. And it'll be easier if you have a problem with that. It will be definitely easier to use the photo I sent you than interpreting a different object, at least for this first drawing. So. So a 2H, and it's all outlined here. I'd use this a 2H, and just keep the pencil sharp and keep moving. The more marks you have on your drawing, the faster you go, the more marks, the more information. Okay, kind of works that way. Doesn't mean you're pushing hard, but if you have, just think about it, if you have 100 marks on your sheet of paper, and you do it in a 2-hour drawing with 100 marks, 100 little scribbles. Compare that drawing to a drawing that has 10,000 little scribbles. Which one's going to be more fulfilling to look at as a rendering of some object in space? The one with the more information. That's the one with the more scribbles, right? So moving fast is pretty important here as well, okay? It's like more pixels, the better the photograph. More resolution. Oh, and eventually you get to something like this, which we're going to focus a little bit more on next week. Talking about more information in a drawing. So this drawing started with little scribbles. This will be it. We'll be done here. Which one should I show you? Well, we'll talk about this next week. But so you can get, really very light little scribbles that gather over time to create resolution, right? This eye on this side looked like this eye on this side, right? Literally. I didn't outline it. I just hung out in areas that were smaller to get that, right? So this is a pretty traditional technique of creating drawing, these kind of fine little scribbles that you make to create a drawing. Here's one we did last fall, pumpkin theme, right? So there's like 2.5 hours in the drawing. Very light, airy scribbles. I mean, there's not resolution here. You can't kind of see it, but, and then, 10 hours in the drawing. I just gather the scribbles, go a little bit darker, just hang out a little bit more. So I get a lot more kind of resolution along edge, see the reflected light underneath the pumpkin there. So here in this drawing, I don't know what's pumpkin and what's not down here, right? Not sure. By the time I'm done with the drawing, no erasing. I did not erase in this drawing. This value at the bottom of the pumpkin here, right there, that light value, is the same value that is right here. The only thing is it looks lighter here. Why does it look lighter right there?
Because you made things darker.
Right, yeah, that little cast shadow below it, right? I figured out finally where I wanted that to be. It started to happen here a little bit in the second version, a little bit better here in the third version, and then the last version, I was pretty clear cut about that. So that's when I could go in and really refine that. That's real pixelated, but you get the idea. So this technique, this open kind of just, random sort of kind of just feeling my way through the drawing kind of thing is really a good way to draw anything. It's kind of a sketchy, kind of how we sketch, and that's totally opposite of what we're trained to do, which is like just outline that thing to begin with and then fill it in. Okay. This is it's just a different philosophy of life, generally speaking, too, right? Is everything in a box in our world, or does everything have a relationship to everything else, right? Everything in the box in our world gets us in trouble, generally speaking, philosophically speaking. This world that has this kind of really complex interrelationship of objects and desires and everything else, if you can kind of see the world in that way, I think it's a richer experience, from my point of view. And this way of drawing kind of engenders that, I think. Not this clear-cut, precise from the get-go sort of kind of resolution, but developing it over time. Anyways, I digress there a little bit. Any general questions? About anything? No? So 2 drawings this week. Just focus on the first one right now. Work a little bit on that today, and we'll go over the structural one Thursday, and that'll be a separate drawing, and then Friday of the weekend, do them both. Not gonna, you know, if you can spend a couple hours on each, that would be cool, right? So, because we're spending some time here and talking in class. Okay, so I know that's taking up your time. So, okay.